The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the cramped dining room of the Wildflower Saloon, followed by a sharp crack that wasn't from any broken dish. Lily Winters flinched as the back of Edgar Truman's hand connected with her cheek, sending her stumbling against the wall. The plate she'd been carrying Edgar's steak and potatoes now lay in pieces across the wooden floorboards, the food scattered like casualties on a battlefield. "Worthless girl," Edgar shouted, his face flushed with whiskey and rage. "Do you know how much that meal cost me?" "You'll pay for that with your wages this week." Lily touched her stinging cheek, her blue eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. "Not here, not in front of everyone." The other patrons of the saloon had gone quiet, all eyes either fixed uncomfortably on their meals or watching the spectacle with morbid curiosity. None made a move to intervene. In Cottonwood Springs, Colorado, 1879, a man disciplining his employee wasn't anyone else's business, except for one man. The sound of spurs jingling announced his approach before a tall shadow fell across the scene. Frank Carson stood beside the table, his broad shoulders blocking the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. His face was partially obscured by the brim of his Stetson, but the hard line of his jaw was visible, clenched tight with barely controlled fury. "That'll be the last time you raise your hand to a lady in my presence, Truman," Frank said, his voice deceptively soft but carrying an unmistakable edge of steel. Edgar scoffed, looking up at the cowboy. "This ain't your concern, Carson. The girl works for me, and she just cost me good money with her clumsiness." Frank's hand moved to rest on the handle of the Colt .45 holstered at his hip. "I'm making it my concern, and I'm telling you now, he'll never raise his hand against her again or any woman in this town. That's a promise." "You threatening me, cowboy?" Edgar stood up, swaying slightly from the whiskey he'd consumed throughout the afternoon. "No, sir," Frank replied, his gaze steady, "just stating a fact." The saloon had gone completely silent now. Lily stood frozen, one hand still pressed to her cheek. She'd seen Frank Carson around town since he'd arrived 3 months ago to work at the Rockingham Ranch outside of town. He'd come into the saloon a few times, always polite, always leaving a generous tip. But they'd exchanged nothing more than pleasantries and smiles. Edgar looked around, realizing he had no allies in this confrontation. With a grunt, he threw some coins onto the table. "Keep your nose out of my business, Carson," he growled before storming toward the door. "And you," he pointed at Lily, "don't bother coming in tomorrow, you're finished here." The door slammed behind Edgar, and the saloon slowly returned to its normal buzz of conversation. Frank turned to Lily, his expression softening as he took in her reddened cheek and trembling hands. "Are you all right, Miss Winters?" Lily nodded stiffly, kneeling to pick up the shattered remains of the plate. "I'm fine, Mr. Carson. Thank you for your concern, but now I'm without a job." Her voice caught slightly, "and I need to clean this up." Frank knelt beside her, gently taking the broken pieces from her hands. "Let me help you with that. You should sit down." "I can't," she whispered. "I still have 3 hours left on my shift, and I need every penny until—" She stopped herself, not wanting to burden this stranger with her troubles. "Until what?" Frank asked softly. Lily sighed. "Until I find another position, which won't be easy now that Edgar will be spreading tales about me through town." Frank's expression darkened momentarily before he signaled to Martha, the cook who owned the Wildflower. The older woman came over, her face etched with concern. "Lily, honey, go put some cold water on that cheek," Martha said kindly. "Don't worry about the mess or the rest of your shift. You take the evening to yourself." "But Martha, you'll get your full day's wages," Martha assured her. "And you still have a job here as long as you want it." "I've been looking for an excuse to get rid of Edgar's influence anyway. Man thinks he owns the place just because his brother's the mayor." Relief flooded through Lily. "Thank you, Martha." Frank helped Lily to her feet. "I'll walk you home if you don't mind the company." Under normal circumstances, Lily would have declined. A young woman walking with a man she barely knew would set tongues wagging in Cottonwood Springs. But her cheek throbbed, and the thought of walking alone past the saloons where Edgar might be drinking made the decision easy. "I would appreciate that, Mr. Carson. Thank you." As they stepped outside into the late afternoon sunshine, Lily was acutely aware of the curious glances from passersby. News traveled fast in small towns. "It's Frank, by the way," he said as they walked. No need for formalities after I inserted myself into your business like that. Then I'm Lily, she replied, attempting a small smile that made her wince as it pulled at her tender cheek. Frank's expression hardened at her reaction. Has he done that before? Hit you? Lily hesitated. Not. Not like that, a grab of the arm when I wasn't moving fast enough, a shove when I was in his way. She shook her head. It's not uncommon in this line of work, Mr. Frank. That doesn't make it right. They walked in silence for a moment before Lily spoke again. Why did you step in? Most men wouldn't have. Frank's stride faltered slightly. I've seen what happens when good people do nothing. His voice had a distant quality, as though his mind had traveled somewhere far away. My mother, she wasn't fortunate enough to have someone step in. Lily felt a pang in her chest. I'm sorry. Don't be, Frank said, his voice returning to normal. It was a long time ago, but I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't be like the men who looked the other way. They approached a modest boarding house on Maple Street. This is where I stay, Lily said, stopping at the gate. Thank you for walking me home. Frank tipped his hat. It was my pleasure, Lily. Will you be all right? I will, she assured him. I've weathered worse storms than Edgar Truman. Something in her tone made Frank look at her more intently. You're not from around here originally, are you? Lily shook her head. St. Louis, I came west after the war, after I lost everything. She didn't elaborate, and Frank didn't press. Well, if you need anything at all, I'm usually at the Rockingham or in town on Saturdays. That's kind of you, but I'll be fine. Lily opened the gate. Goodbye, Frank. Goodbye, Lily. She watched him walk away, his tall figure cutting an impressive silhouette against the setting sun. Only when he disappeared around the corner did Lily allow herself to acknowledge the flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with her encounter with Edgar. The next morning, Lily's face bore a faint bruise that she carefully covered with powder before heading to the Wildflower. Despite Martha's assurance, she half expected to find the door barred to her. Instead, Martha greeted her warmly and put her to work immediately. Edgar came by last night threatening to pull his business, Martha confided as they prepared for the breakfast crowd. I told him his business wasn't worth watching him mistreat my girls. Martha, you shouldn't have risked your livelihood for me. The older woman waved her concern away. This saloon was running fine before Edgar Truman started throwing his weight around, and it'll run fine without him. Besides, she added with a wink, his brother may be mayor, but his wife takes her meals here, and she was none too pleased to hear how her brother-in-law behaves. The day passed without incident, though Lily noticed the townspeople watching her with a mix of curiosity and sympathy. By closing time, her cheek ached from the forced smile she'd maintained throughout her shift. As she was sweeping the porch, a familiar figure approached on horseback. Frank Carson dismounted with an easy grace that spoke of years in the saddle. He looked different today, freshly shaven, his dark brown hair neatly combed, wearing a clean shirt under his leather vest. Evening, Lily, he said, removing his hat as he approached. How are you feeling today? Much better, thank you. She leaned on her broom, suddenly self-conscious about her work-worn dress and the wisps of blonde hair that had escaped her bun. What brings you to town on a Tuesday? Had some business with the blacksmith, Frank replied. And I wanted to make sure you were doing all right. That's thoughtful of you. An awkward silence fell between them until Frank cleared his throat. I was wondering if you might allow me to call on you properly. Perhaps Sunday after church, Lily blinked in surprise. Call on me. For a walk or dinner, Frank clarified, a hint of color rising in his tan cheeks. If you'd like to, that is. The request caught her completely off guard. Mr. Carson, Frank, I'm flattered, but I don't think that would be wise. His face fell slightly. May I ask why not? Lily glanced around to ensure no one was within earshot. You're a respected ranch hand with prospects. I'm a saloon girl with a questionable past. The gossips in this town would have a field day. I don't care much for gossip, Frank said simply, and neither should you. That's easy to say when you're not the subject of it, Lily countered. Besides, you don't know anything about me. I'd like to, he said, his voice earnest, if you'd give me the chance. Lily studied his face, searching for any sign of deception or ill intent, but found only sincerity in his warm brown eyes. Still, experience had taught her caution. Let me think about it, she finally said. Frank nodded, seeming content with that answer. I'll come by on Sunday and you can give me your decision then. He put his hat back on. Good evening, Lily. Good evening, Frank. She watched him ride away, her mind a whirl of conflicting emotions. It had been years since a man had courted her properly. Years since she'd allowed herself to consider the possibility. Well now, that's interesting, Martha said from the doorway, making Lily jump. Frank Carson's a good man, one of the few. I barely know him, Lily protested. You know he stood up for you when no one else would, Martha pointed out. That says plenty about a man's character. That night, Lily lay awake in her small room at the boarding house, thinking about Frank's invitation. Part of her wanted to accept the part that still believed in the dreams she'd had as a young girl in St. Louis, before the war had taken her family and her first love. But the practical side of her, the side forged through years of hard lessons, urged caution. Frank Carson was undeniably handsome, with his tall, lean frame and those expressive brown eyes. He was well regarded in town, known for his skill with horses and his fair dealings. But Lily knew how quickly a man's gentle facade could crumble. She'd learned that lesson from her late husband, whose charming courtship had given way to dark moods and violent outbursts after they wed. By Sunday morning, she still hadn't made up her mind. She dressed carefully for church in her one good dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and pinned her blonde hair in a modest style. The bruise on her cheek had faded to a yellowish shadow that was barely noticeable. Frank was waiting outside the small wooden church after the service, standing a respectful distance from the departing congregation. When he spotted Lily, a smile spread across his face that made her heart skip despite her reservations. "Good morning, Miss Winters," he greeted her formally, mindful of the watchful eyes around them. "It's a fine day for a walk if you're amenable." After a moment's hesitation, Lily nodded. "A short one, Mr. Carson." They strolled down the main street and toward the small park that served as the town's gathering place. Frank kept a proper distance between them, his hands clasped behind his back. "How long have you been in Cottonwood Springs?" he asked. "Almost a year now," Lily replied. "I came west after my husband died." Frank's eyebrows rose slightly. "I didn't realize you were a widow." "Most people don't. I don't wear black anymore and I don't use my married name." She hesitated before adding, "My marriage wasn't a happy one." Understanding dawned in Frank's eyes. "I see." "Do you?" Lily asked softly. "Because most men don't. They see a woman alone and think she needs saving or that she's available for whatever they want to offer." "I don't think you need saving, Lily," Frank said, "but everyone needs a friend sometimes. That's all I'm offering today, friendship." They reached a bench beneath a large cottonwood tree, and Lily sat down, grateful for the shade against the warm spring sun. Frank remained standing, keeping a respectful distance. "Tell me about your ranch," Lily prompted, wanting to move the conversation to safer ground. Frank's face brightened. "It's not my ranch yet, but Mr. Montgomery has been training me to take over as foreman. He's getting on in years and his son has no interest in ranching. You enjoy the work." "I do. There's something honest about it, caring for the animals, working the land." He leaned against the tree trunk. "What about you? Has working at the Wildflower been good to you?" Lily shrugged. "It puts food on the table and keeps a roof over my head. Martha's fair and most of the customers are decent enough." She traced a pattern on the bench beside her. "It wasn't what I imagined for my life, but few things turn out as we imagine, don't they?" "What did you imagine?" Frank asked gently. Lily looked up at the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. "A home of my own. Children, perhaps. My father was a teacher before the war, and I always thought I might follow in his footsteps." "You could still teach," Frank suggested. "The town's growing, they'll need more teachers soon." Lily gave him a sad smile. "A divorced saloon girl with rumors following her." "I don't think the school board would approve." Frank's brow furrowed. "Divorced? I thought you said you were a widow." Lily froze, realizing her slip. I am, that's what I meant." But Frank was too perceptive to miss her reaction. He sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "Lily, whatever your past is, it doesn't change how I see you now." "You say that," she whispered, "but you don't know everything." "Then tell me," he urged. "I'm a good listener." Lily looked at him, weighing her options. Something in his steadfast gaze made her want to trust him, despite her better judgment. "I was married at 17 to a man named James Calloway," she began slowly. "He was charming, handsome, the son of my father's colleague. When my parents died in a fire during the war, he offered security, a home. She twisted her hands in her lap. But after we wed, he changed. The drinking started, then the accusations, then the… She couldn't bring herself to say the word. He hurt you, Frank stated, not a question. Lily nodded. For 3 years, I endured it. I tried to be a better wife, thinking I was somehow at fault, but nothing helped. Finally, when I feared he might kill me in one of his rages, I fled in the night. I came west, changed my name back to Winters, and told everyone I was a widow. Divorce isn't something people speak of in polite company, Frank observed. No, it isn't, and I never actually obtained one, Lily admitted. I simply disappeared. For all I know, James is still looking for me, or he's found another young woman to torment. Frank was quiet for a long moment. Thank you for trusting me with the truth. Now you understand why I hesitated to accept your invitation, Lily said. My past is complicated and not something a respectable man would want to associate with. Frank turned to face her directly. Lily, what happened to you wasn't your fault. You survived, you rebuilt your life. That shows character, not weakness. Tears pricked at Lily's eyes. You're kind to say so. It's not kindness, it's truth. He hesitated before continuing. My offer of friendship stands, nothing more, nothing expected. Just someone to talk to walk with on Sundays if you'd like. Lily studied his face, searching again for any sign of deception. Finding none, she nodded slowly. I think I'd like that, Frank, friendship. And so began a cautious courtship that wasn't called a courtship. Every Sunday after church, Frank would wait for Lily, and they would walk together. Sometimes they'd sit by the creek that ran behind the town, talking about books they'd read or sharing stories from their childhoods. Frank told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about losing his father in the war and watching his mother suffer under his uncle's harsh rule afterward. She died when I was 15. He told Lily one warm afternoon in June as they sat on a blanket by the water. Worked herself to death, really. My uncle saw no reason to pay for a doctor when she fell ill. I'm so sorry, Frank. I left the next day, worked my way west, ranch to ranch, learned everything I could about horses, cattle, found I had a knack for it. He picked up a stone and skipped it across the water. But I never forgot what happened to my mother, how people just let it happen. As spring turned to summer, Lily found herself looking forward to their Sundays together. Frank never pushed for more than she was willing to give, never made her feel uncomfortable. Sometimes he brought her small gifts, a ribbon for her hair, a book of poetry he'd found in the general store, wildflowers picked on his ride into town. The townsfolk noticed, of course. Lily overheard the whispers when she served drinks at the Wildflower. Some were unkind, suggesting she had set her cap for one of the most eligible young men in the county. Others were merely curious about the unlikely pairing. Martha defended her fiercely against the gossips. And gradually, as summer progressed, Lily found that many of the townswomen began to treat her with more respect, acknowledging her with nods and smiles rather than suspicious glances. In July, Frank invited her to a town social, the first time they would appear together at a public gathering beyond their Sunday walks. Lily spent hours preparing, reworking an old dress with new trim and borrowing a shawl from Martha. You look beautiful, Frank said when he came to escort her, his eyes warm with admiration. The social was held in the town square, with lanterns strung between the trees and a small band playing lively tunes. Many people stared when Frank led Lily onto the dance floor, but he seemed oblivious to their attention, his focus entirely on her. People are watching, Lily murmured as they moved through the steps of a waltz. Let them, Frank replied simply. I'm only concerned with your opinion, not theirs. As the evening progressed, Lily gradually relaxed, even enjoying conversations with some of the ranchers' wives who had previously ignored her. Frank stayed by her side, his steady presence a comfort against the occasional disapproving glance. They were walking home under the stars when disaster struck. A figure stumbled out of the shadows ahead of them, swaying drunkenly in the middle of the street. Well, well, slurred a familiar voice, if it isn't the gallant cowboy and his saloon girl. Edgar Truman stood blocking their path, his face flushed with whiskey and malice. Lily instinctively stepped closer to Frank. Evening, Truman, Frank said coolly. You're blocking the road. Edgar sneered. Not so high and mighty now, are you, Carson? Town's talking about how you've been sniffing around this one. He jerked his head toward Lily. Didn't take long for her to land on her back for you, did it? Frank's body tensed, but his voice remained controlled. You're drunk, Edgar. Go home before you say something you'll regret. Regret. Edgar laughed harshly. The only regret is that I didn't know she was so eager, could have saved myself some money at Rosie's place. Frank moved so quickly that Lily barely saw it happen. One moment he was beside her, the next he had Edgar by the collar, pushing him against a hitching post. Apologize to the lady, Frank growled. Edgar struggled against Frank's grip. Get your hands off me, you don't know who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, a coward who hits women and insults their honor. Frank's voice was dangerously quiet. Apologize, or I'll make sure the whole town knows what kind of man you really are. Frank, Lily said softly, touching his arm, he's not worth it. For a moment she thought Frank wouldn't listen. Then slowly he released Edgar, who stumbled and nearly fell. You'll regret this, Carson, Edgar spat. Both of you will. Go home, Edgar, Frank said tiredly. Sleep it off. Edgar straightened his rumpled jacket and stalked away, muttering threats under his breath. Frank turned to Lily, his expression softening with concern. Are you all right? Lily nodded, though she felt shaken. I'm used to men like Edgar. His kind are common in my line of work. Frank's jaw tightened. You shouldn't have to be used to it. They continued walking, but the easy mood of the evening had been shattered. When they reached Lily's boarding house, she paused at the gate. Frank, I think perhaps we should cool things between us for a while. Because of what Edgar said, Frank asked, clearly surprised. Because of what everyone is thinking but not saying to our faces, Lily clarified. You have a position of respect in this community. I don't want to damage that. Frank shook his head. I don't care what they think, Lily. But I do, she insisted. You have a future here. I won't be the reason you lose it. Before he could argue further, Lily quickly entered the gate and hurried inside, not trusting herself to remain strong if she stayed in his presence any longer. The next day at the Wildflower, Martha noticed Lily's subdued mood immediately. Trouble with your cowboy? She asked as they prepared for the lunch crowd. He's not my cowboy, Lily replied automatically, and yes, in a manner of speaking. Martha raised an eyebrow. Want to talk about it? Lily sighed. We encountered Edgar last night. He was drunk, said some ugly things. That man's tongue is going to get him in serious trouble one day, Martha muttered. But that's not what's really bothering you, is it? No, Lily admitted. I told Frank we should stop seeing each other. People are talking and I don't want to hurt his reputation. Martha laughed outright. Oh, honey, Frank Carson doesn't give two hoots about what people say. That man looks at you like you hung the moon and stars. That's the problem, Lily said quietly. I think he's developing feelings that I can't return. Martha gave her a knowing look. Can't or won't allow yourself to. Before Lily could respond, the front door burst open and one of the ranch hands from the Rocking M rushed in. Martha, we need help. There's been an accident at the ranch. Frank Carson's been hurt bad. Lily's heart seemed to stop. What happened? Breaking a new stallion. Horse threw him into a fence post. He's got a bad head wound and maybe some broken ribs. Doc's with him now at the ranch, but it doesn't look good. Without thinking, Lily untied her apron. Martha, I need to go, the older woman said, already taking the apron from her. Take my wagon. It's hitched out back. The ride to the Rocking M seemed interminable, though it was only a few miles outside of town. Lily's mind raced with terrible possibilities. By the time she arrived, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely tie off the horses. A ranch hand directed her to the bunkhouse, where Doc Miller was emerging, wiping his hands on a cloth. His grave expression sent a chill through Lily. How is he? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The doctor sighed. It's touch and go, Miss Winters. He's got a severe concussion, 3 broken ribs, and I'm concerned about internal bleeding. I've done what I can, but the next 24 hours will tell. Can I see him? Doc Miller hesitated, then nodded. He's been asking for you. Just prepare yourself. He looks worse than he is. That was a lie, Lily realized as she entered the dimly lit bunkhouse. Frank lay on a narrow bed, his face ashen beneath a blood-stained bandage wrapped around his head. His breathing was labored, and a deep purple bruise spread across the visible portion of his chest. Lily moved to his side, gently taking his hand. Frank, it's Lily. His eyelids fluttered, then opened. For a moment his gaze seemed unfocused before settling on her face. Lily, he whispered. You came. Of course I came, she said, fighting back tears. How could I not? A ghost of a smile touched his pale lips. After last night, wasn't sure. Hush, she soothed. Don't try to talk, you need to rest, need to tell you. His words slurred slightly, his grip on her hand weakening. In case I don't. Don't say that, Lily interrupted, a tear escaping despite her efforts. You're going to be fine. Frank's eyes closed, his breathing growing more labored. Love you, Lily, should have told you sooner. The words sent a shock through her system. Frank, but he had slipped into unconsciousness. Doc Miller returned, checking Frank's pulse with a frown. He needs round-the-clock care, the doctor said. I've sent for a nurse from Junction City, but she won't be here until tomorrow at the earliest. I'll stay with him, Lily said firmly. Doc Miller raised an eyebrow. It won't be proper, a young woman alone with propriety be damned, Lily interrupted, surprising herself with her vehemence. He needs care and I can provide it. I nursed my father through typhoid during the war, I know what to do. The doctor studied her for a moment, then nodded. Very well, I'll leave laudanum for the pain when he wakes and instructions for changing the bandages. I'll return in the morning. After the doctor left, Lily settled into a chair beside Frank's bed. The ranch hands brought her water, clean cloths, and offers of food that she couldn't bring herself to accept. As night fell, the bunkhouse emptied, the men finding other accommodations to give Frank peace and Lily privacy. Through the long night, Lily kept her vigil. She bathed Frank's fevered brow, monitored his breathing, and prayed as she hadn't prayed in years. When he grew restless, she spoke to him softly, telling him stories of her childhood and scent. Louis, of her dreams for the future dreams she was only now admitting to herself. You can't leave me, Frank Carson, she whispered in the darkest hour before dawn. Not when I've just realized that I love you too. Whether it was her care, her confession, or simply his own strong constitution, Frank's fever broke shortly before sunrise. When Doc Miller returned, he found Frank conscious and Lily asleep in the chair beside him, her head resting on the edge of the bed, her hand still clasping his. Well now, the doctor said after examining Frank. You're a stubborn one, Carson. Looks like you've turned the corner. Frank's eyes moved to Lily's sleeping form. How long has she been here? All night, Doc Miller replied. Wouldn't leave your side, insisted on caring for you herself. A tender expression crossed Frank's face. She's something special, Doc. Seems so, the doctor agreed. Rest now, you're not out of the woods yet, but I think you'll make it. The next few days passed in a blur for Lily. She divided her time between the Wildflower, where Martha insisted she continue working short shifts to maintain appearances, and the Rocking M, where she spent every available moment at Frank's bedside. The ranch hands treated her with newfound respect, and even Mr. Montgomery, the ranch owner, expressed his gratitude for her care. A week after the accident, Frank was strong enough to sit up and take solid food. Lily arrived to find him dressed, albeit moving gingerly, sitting on the edge of the bed. Should you be up? She asked, setting down the basket of fresh biscuits she'd brought. Doc says limited movement is good for me, Frank replied. His color had improved dramatically, though the bandage around his head remained, now clean and much smaller. Besides, I'm tired of looking at these four walls, Lily smiled. I can imagine. Martha sent these for you, she added, indicating the basket. You've both been too kind. Frank patted the space beside him on the bed. Sit with me, Lily hesitated only briefly before joining him. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Frank spoke again. I remember what I said to you that first night, he said quietly. About loving you. Lily's cheeks warmed. You were delirious with fever. Maybe so, but I meant every word. Frank turned to face her. I know your past makes you cautious, Lily. I know you've been hurt, but I'm asking you to take a chance on me, on us. Lily looked down at her hands. It's not that simple, Frank. It can be, he insisted gently. I'm not asking for promises right now, just don't push me away because you're afraid. When she remained silent, Frank continued, I've been offered the foreman position. Mr. Montgomery made it official yesterday. It comes with the use of the foreman's cabin, a real home, Lily. Small but sturdy, room enough for two, maybe more someday. The implication was clear. Lily's heart raced with both hope and fear. Frank, he took her hand, his touch reverent. You don't have to answer now, just think about it. Think about what could be, not what has been. 2 weeks later, Frank was well enough to return to light duties at the ranch. Lily continued her work at the Wildflower, but something had shifted between them. Their Sunday walks resumed, now with a new openness that hadn't existed before. Frank spoke of his plans for the ranch, his dreams of having his own land someday. Lily found herself sharing her own hopes of perhaps opening a small school, of having a garden, of creating a life far different from what she'd known. In late August, as they sat by their favorite spot near the creek, Frank reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. "I've been carrying this for weeks," he said, holding out a simple gold ring. "It was my mother's. I want it to be yours." Lily stared at the ring, her heart pounding. "Frank, I love you, Lily Winters," he said, his voice steady and sure. "I want to spend my life with you. I want to build a home with you, raise children with you. I want to grow old watching you teach our grandchildren to read." He took her hand. "I promise you this, I will never raise a hand to you in anger. I will honor and cherish you all the days of my life. I will stand by you against any who would speak ill of you." Tears filled Lily's eyes. "What about my past? My husband is not your husband anymore," Frank said firmly. "I've spoken to Judge Parker. He says after 5 years of abandonment, your marriage can be legally dissolved. We can file the papers, make everything proper and legal." "You've thought of everything," Lily said softly. "I've had plenty of time to think lying in that sick bed." Frank smiled. "So, Lily Winters, will you marry me? Will you take a chance on this cowboy who fell in love with you the moment he saw you stand up for yourself in that saloon?" Lily looked into his earnest brown eyes and felt the last of her walls crumble. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Frank Carson." They were married in October when the cottonwoods blazed golden against the blue Colorado sky. Martha hosted the reception at the Wildflower, closed for the day to all but invited guests. The entire town seemed to attend, any previous gossip forgotten in the face of their obvious happiness. Edgar Truman was noticeably absent, having left town shortly after Frank's accident under a cloud of suspicion. Rumors suggested he'd been involved, somehow perhaps spooking the horse that had thrown Frank, but nothing was ever proven. Whatever the truth, no one mourned his departure. After the celebration, Frank drove Lily to their new home, the foreman's cabin, freshly painted and furnished with a mix of his simple belongings and wedding gifts from the community. A hand-sewn quilt from Martha adorned the bed, and a small bookshelf held volumes donated by the schoolteacher, who had promised to consider Lily as an assistant when the new school term began. As twilight fell, they stood on the porch of their home, Frank's arm around Lily's waist as they watched the stars appear one by one. "Are you happy, Mrs. Carson?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Lily leaned into his embrace. "Happier than I ever thought possible. No regrets." "About leaving the Wildflower? None," she assured him. "Though I'll miss Martha. She can visit anytime," Frank said. "She's family now as far as I'm concerned." Lily turned in his arms to face him. "Thank you. For what?" "For seeing me, really seeing me when everyone else just looked past," she said softly. "For keeping your promise that day in the saloon." Frank's expression grew solemn. "Which promise was that? You said he would never raise his hand against me again, and he never did." Frank drew her closer. "Some promises are easy to keep when they're made to the right person." As they stood together on the threshold of their new life, Lily knew that the broken pieces of her past had finally been mended. Not erased, they would always be part of her story, but transformed into something beautiful, like the bits of colored glass in a kaleidoscope, shifting to reveal unexpected patterns of light and joy. In the quiet moments before dawn on their first morning as husband and wife, Lily watched Frank sleeping peacefully beside her and whispered her own promise. "I'll never let fear keep me from loving you, not ever again." And in the years that followed through the birth of their children, the building of their own ranch, and the eventual opening of Lily's school for the children of Cottonwood Springs, it was a promise she kept with her whole heart.